Thomas Blackwood froze mid-step among the neat rows of Arlington's gravestones, the yellow daisies in his hand suddenly heavy as lead. Standing before Catherine's headstone was a small girl, 6, maybe 7 years old, her blonde hair dancing in the September breeze as she carefully arranged wildflowers on the grave. She was supposed to be alone at this sacred ritual. No child should be waiting at his wife's grave. The cemetery caretaker's footsteps crunched on gravel behind him, his sharp intake of breath confirming this wasn't normal. "She comes every week, sir. Always alone, always talking to the stone like they're old friends." Thomas's throat constricted as the girl turned, revealing familiar blue eyes, his eyes in Catherine's delicate face. The eyes he'd never expected to see again after Catherine's funeral 8 months ago. "Daddy," she whispered, voice trembling but sure. "Mommy said you'd find me here." What secret had Catherine taken to her grave? And why was this child, with his eyes and Catherine's smile, looking at him with such desperate hope? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The world seemed to narrow to this impossible moment. Thomas standing frozen before a child who called him Daddy at his wife's grave. He knelt slowly, setting the daisies beside the girl's wildflowers, trying to steady his racing heart. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler than he thought himself capable of. "Emma," she replied, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit missing one ear. "Emma Catherine Blackwood." She said it proudly, like she'd practiced it many times. Thomas's mind reeled. Catherine had never mentioned a child, certainly not one bearing his name. They'd been separated for nearly 4 years before her death, after his 3rd tour in Afghanistan left him with injuries the doctors said would prevent him from ever fathering children. "Who takes care of you, Emma?" he asked carefully. "Mr. Maxwell at Brighter Horizons?" But Mommy said not to trust him. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "She said he was a bad man who pretends to be good." Before Thomas could respond, a sharp voice cut through the cemetery's quiet. "Emma, there you are!" A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit approached, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. He placed a proprietary hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'm Robert Maxwell, Emma's guardian. I apologize if she bothered you." Thomas stood, military instincts assessing the newcomer, polished, powerful, and projecting authority. But something in the way Emma shrank from his touch set off warning bells. "She wasn't bothering me," Thomas replied evenly. "She was visiting my wife's grave." Maxwell's smile flickered momentarily. "Emma has quite an imagination. Her mother was my cousin Susan, who passed in the same accident as your wife. A terrible tragedy." "My mommy's name was Catherine," Emma insisted, her small voice defiant despite her trembling lips. Maxwell's fingers tightened on her shoulder. "Now, Emma, we've talked about these stories. Come along, we're late for your therapy appointment." Thomas watched helplessly as Maxwell led Emma away, her blue eyes so achingly familiar, looking back at him until they disappeared through the cemetery gates. "That little girl's been coming here every Sunday for months," said the elderly caretaker, appearing at Thomas's side. "Always alone, though I keep an eye on her from a distance. First time I've seen that fellow with her." Thomas stared at Catherine's headstone, his mind racing through impossible calculations. 4 years since their separation, a child who appeared to be about 6, his supposed infertility. "Does she talk to you?" he asked the caretaker. "Sometimes. Calls her mother Mommy and tells her about her week. Once heard her say, 'Mommy, when will my real daddy find me? You promised he would come.'" Thomas knelt again before Catherine's grave, touching the cold marble. What secrets had she kept? And why did she keep them? He pulled out his phone and searched for Brighter Horizons Foundation. The website showed a colonial-style mansion with smiling children and glowing testimonials about their work with orphans and foster children. Robert Maxwell's photo appeared under Executive Director, the same cold smile Thomas had just encountered. Something was very wrong here, and if Emma was somehow his daughter, he needed to find out the truth, no matter what it cost. Thomas didn't sleep that night. His apartment, Spartan and impersonal since Catherine's death, felt suddenly hollow, as if the ghost of what might have been hovered in the corners. If Emma was his daughter, then Catherine had kept her entire existence from him for years. But why? The military had taught Thomas to approach unknowns systematically. By morning, he had a plan. First stop, Washington Memorial Hospital, where Catherine had worked after leaving military service. The hospital's antiseptic scent hit him as he walked through the sliding doors, a familiar backdrop to his last memories with Catherine. They'd met when she was a combat nurse tending to his wounds in Afghanistan. Their connection had been immediate and profound, a lighthouse in the chaos of war. After his medical discharge, they'd married quickly, building dreams that shattered when his final medical evaluation revealed the IED blast had likely left him sterile. "I can't give you the family you want," he'd told her, pulling away in what he'd believed was an act of love. Catherine had fought, insisted it didn't matter, but he'd been too broken, too certain she deserved better. Within months, the divorce was final, and Catherine disappeared from his life. Until 8 months ago, when a police officer appeared at his door with news of her death. Single-car accident on a rain-slicked road. At the hospital reception desk, Thomas placed his military ID beside a photo of him and Catherine from happier days. "I need to speak with someone who worked closely with Catherine Blackwood," he said. The receptionist's eyes softened in recognition. "Let me call Dr. Lawson. She and Catherine were close." 15 minutes later, a woman in her mid-40s with steel-gray hair pulled into a practical bun approached. Dr. Jennifer Lawson's eyes widened briefly at the sight of Thomas. "I wondered if you'd come eventually," she said simply, leading him to a small consultation room. Once the door closed, Thomas went straight to the point. "There's a little girl visiting Catherine's grave. She says her name is Emma Catherine Blackwood, and she called me Daddy." Jennifer's expression remained carefully neutral. "What do you want to know, Thomas? Is she mine? Did Catherine have a child she never told me about?" A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Jennifer opened a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope. "Catherine left this with me. She said if anything happened to her, and if you ever came asking about Emma, I should give it to you." Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a birth certificate. Emma Catherine Blackwood, born March 12, 2017. Mother, Catherine Ann Blackwood. Father, Thomas James Blackwood. "This can't be right," he whispered. "The doctors said—" "Low probability isn't no probability," Jennifer interrupted gently. "Catherine discovered she was pregnant 3 months after your separation. She was shocked, to say the least." "Why didn't she tell me?" The question came out rawer than he intended. Jennifer's gaze was steady. "She tried to call you, multiple times. Your number was disconnected. You'd moved without forwarding information. When she finally tracked down your address through military contacts, she drove 6 hours to see you." Thomas felt sick. "I never saw her." "No, because when she arrived, she saw you with another woman, looking happy, starting over. She decided then not to disrupt your new life with a pregnancy you'd made clear you didn't want." The memory surfaced slowly. His cousin visiting with her new girlfriend, the only time he'd genuinely laughed in months. Catherine had misunderstood completely. "That was my cousin Rachel," he said hoarsely. "There was never anyone else after Catherine." Jennifer nodded sadly. By the time Catherine realized her mistake, other complications had arisen. She'd begun volunteering at Brighter Horizons while pregnant, using her medical training to help the children there. That's when she noticed irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Children's medical records being altered, histories fabricated, children with living relatives suddenly classified as orphans, and some children disappearing altogether. Thomas's military training kicked in, his mind cataloging information methodically. She was investigating them. Yes, she compiled evidence, kept meticulous records. Then, just before Emma's first birthday, Robert Maxwell caught her accessing restricted files. Instead of firing her, he made her an offer: continue working at Brighter Horizons under his supervision, or he would make sure she lost custody of Emma. How could he do that? Jennifer's expression darkened. Maxwell has powerful connections: judges, child services directors, police officials. He threatened to have her declared an unfit mother based on fabricated psychological evaluations. Catherine knew enough about his operation by then to believe he could do it. So she stayed silent. Not entirely. She continued gathering evidence, but more carefully. She created a network of trusted people, myself, a few others. When Emma was old enough to understand, Catherine began preparing her for the possibility that something might happen. Thomas stared at the birth certificate, his daughter's name blurring through unshed tears. Catherine's accident was no accident, in my opinion, Jennifer finished quietly. 3 days before she died, Catherine called me, sounding frightened. She said she'd found proof of where the children were being sent and who was paying for them. She was planning to take Emma and go to the FBI. Thomas's jaw tightened. Maxwell had her killed. I can't prove it. But yes, I believe so. Within hours of her death, Maxwell had produced paperwork naming him as Emma's guardian. Too quickly, too efficiently for it to have been coincidence. Why didn't you go to the police? With what? Suspicions? Against a man who has half the city's elite at his fundraising galas? I've been watching, waiting, trying to make sure Emma was safe until... She hesitated. Until what? Until Catherine's contingency plan activated. She always believed you'd come looking for them eventually. She made Emma memorize your name, your face from photographs. Taught her to visit the grave weekly, hoping you'd come there too. Thomas stood abruptly, pacing the small room. I need to get Emma away from him. It's not that simple. You have no legal standing without a paternity test. Maxwell's guardianship appears legitimate on paper. And if you challenge him directly, he'll know you're on to him. Jennifer leaned forward. Thomas, listen to me. Catherine was building a case methodically. You need to do the same. Where did she keep her evidence? That's just it. I don't know. After Maxwell threatened her, she became extremely cautious. She mentioned once that she kept the most damning evidence where only Emma could find it. Does that mean anything to you? Thomas thought of the stuffed rabbit Emma had clutched so tightly. Maybe. What else can you tell me about Brighter Horizons? They present as a top-tier residential facility for orphaned and abandoned children. In reality, it appears to be a sophisticated screening operation. Children are evaluated, documented, and then placed. Placed where? Overseas, primarily. To wealthy clients willing to pay enormous sums for children with specific attributes, especially children with no family connections who won't be missed. Thomas felt cold rage building inside him. Trafficking. Jennifer nodded grimly. Catherine believed so, yes. But disguised as private adoptions or specialized educational placements. The paperwork is immaculate, the legality murky enough to provide deniability. How much time do I have? I don't know, but Catherine was terrified they would eventually place Emma too, once she was properly conditioned. Thomas slipped the birth certificate into his jacket pocket and stood. I need to see this place for myself. Be careful, Jennifer warned. If Maxwell suspects you know anything, Emma could disappear overnight. I've spent 15 years in combat zones. I know how to observe without being seen. Jennifer scribbled something on a prescription pad and handed it to him. My private number, day or night. And Thomas, her voice softened, Catherine never stopped loving you. Whatever else you discover, know that. Outside the hospital, Thomas sat in his truck, staring at the birth certificate, his daughter. For 6 years, he'd had a daughter he never knew existed. While he'd been drowning in self-pity, Catherine had been raising their child alone, fighting a dangerous battle against powerful enemies. And now she was gone, leaving Emma in the hands of the very people Catherine had feared. Thomas started the engine. He needed more information, more evidence. But one thing was already certain. He would not fail Emma the way he had failed Catherine. Whatever it took, he would bring his daughter home. Thomas spent the next 3 days in careful reconnaissance of brighter horizons. The colonial-style mansion sat on 10 manicured acres in an affluent suburb, its pristine white columns and well-tended gardens projecting an image of prosperity and care. Security was discreet but thorough. Cameras mounted at strategic points, keycard access at all entrances, and roving guards disguised as groundskeepers. He observed the rhythms of the place from various vantage points. Children emerged for outdoor activities at scheduled times, always under supervision. Deliveries arrived Tuesdays and Fridays. Staff changed shifts at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m. Everything ran with military precision, unusual for a children's home, where some degree of chaos would be natural. On the 3rd day, Thomas spotted Emma and a group of children playing in the front garden. Unlike the others, who ran and laughed with forced enthusiasm, she sat alone on a bench, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, watching the gates as if waiting for someone. For him, he realized with a pang of guilt, it was time for a closer look. Thomas couldn't risk approaching as himself. Maxwell would recognize him immediately. Instead, he created a cover identity. Thomas Black, representing a veterans support foundation interested in partnering with children's charities. He made an appointment for a tour, purchased an appropriate suit, and prepared to enter the lion's den. The receptionist who greeted him was professionally warm, her smile practiced. "Mr. Maxwell will be with you shortly. Would you like coffee while you wait?" Thomas accepted, using the opportunity to scan the lobby. Everything was immaculate, too immaculate for a facility housing dozens of children. The artwork was expensive but soulless, the furniture elegant but uncomfortable. It felt more like a high-end corporate office than a home. "Mr. Black," Robert Maxwell's voice carried the polished authority of old money and Ivy League education. He extended his hand, his grip firm and calculated. "Welcome to Brighter Horizons. We're always pleased to explore partnerships with veterans organizations." Up close, Maxwell was even more unsettling. Impeccably groomed, expensively dressed, with the practiced charm of a seasoned politician. But his eyes remained cold, assessing Thomas with the clinical detachment of a man who evaluated everything and everyone in terms of utility. "Thank you for making time," Thomas replied, matching Maxwell's professional tone. "Our foundation is looking to expand our community impact through partnerships with established children's charities." "Excellent. Let me show you around." The tour was clearly designed to impress. Maxwell led him through spotless classrooms where children sat in perfect rows, reciting lessons with robotic precision. In a music room, children played instruments with technical proficiency, but no joy. The dormitories featured comfortable beds with identical blue coverlets, each made with hospital corners, no personal items in sight. "Our approach emphasizes structure and excellence," Maxwell explained. "Many of these children come from chaotic backgrounds. We provide the stability they need to thrive. What about play, self-expression? Thomas asked. Maxwell's smile tightened slightly. Of course, we have scheduled recreation periods, but these children need discipline more than indulgence. Many of them will eventually be placed in highly selective international schools or specialized programs. We prepare them for those opportunities. As they passed a small library, Thomas caught sight of Emma sitting alone at a table, carefully printing letters in a workbook. She looked up as they passed, her eyes widening in recognition before quickly dropping back to her work. "That's Emma, correct?" Thomas asked casually. "I believe I saw her at Arlington Cemetery last weekend. She was visiting a grave near my wife's." A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Maxwell's face before his smooth mask returned. "Yes, Emma is one of our special cases. Her mother was a distant cousin of mine who died in a car accident. No father in the picture, unfortunately. She's still processing her loss. She seems very well behaved. She's an exceptionally bright child. We have high hopes for her placement prospects." The casual way Maxwell discussed placing a child he claimed was his relative sent ice through Thomas's veins. "What exactly does placement entail?" he asked. "It depends on the child. Some go to elite boarding schools overseas, others to specialized therapeutic programs, a few to private adoptions with carefully vetted families. We pride ourselves on finding the perfect match for each child's unique needs and potential." They continued through administrative offices, a medical suite staffed by a nurse who avoided eye contact, and finally to the dining hall where children were eating lunch in near silence. "This is quite an operation," Thomas commented. "How many children do you currently have in residence?" 47 at present, though that number fluctuates as placements are arranged." Maxwell checked his watch. "I apologize, but I have another appointment. Nancy will see you out and provide our partnership materials. We'd be delighted to hear more about your foundation's interests." As Maxwell departed, a young woman with dark hair approached. "I'm Nancy. I'll get those materials for you." Her voice was quiet, nervous. Thomas followed her to a small office where she gathered brochures into a folder. As she handed it to him, she slipped a small note underneath, her eyes meeting his briefly with unmistakable intent. Outside in his truck, Thomas unfolded the note. "Parking lot of Riverside Cafe, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Catherine." At precisely 7 p.m., Thomas sat in his truck in the far corner of the cafe parking lot, engine off, watching for surveillance. 10 minutes later, a compact car pulled up beside him. The dark-haired woman from Brighter Horizons, Nancy, gestured for him to join her. "I can't be seen talking to you," she said as soon as he closed the passenger door. "My name is Lisa Martinez. I worked with your wife." "You know who I am." She nodded. "Catherine showed me your picture. She said if anything happened to her, you might come looking. I've been watching for you since her funeral." "Why didn't you approach me then?" "It wasn't safe. Maxwell had people at the service, watching everyone who attended. But when I saw your name on today's visitor log, I knew it had to be you. What can you tell me about what's happening at Brighter Horizons?" Lisa glanced nervously at her mirrors before answering. "It's worse than Catherine thought. They're not just placing children for adoption, they're selling them to wealthy clients overseas who want children with specific attributes: intelligence, appearance, temperament, children who won't be traced, who have no family looking for them. Human trafficking," Thomas said grimly, "disguised as legitimate international adoptions or educational placements. The paperwork is impeccable. They have people inside immigration, child services, even law enforcement who help process everything legally, but the children essentially disappear. No follow-up, no tracking." "And Emma, my daughter?" Lisa's expression softened. "Catherine protected her as long as she could. Made sure Emma was classified as special status, not eligible for immediate placement. But since Catherine died, She hesitated. Maxwell has been taking a personal interest in Emma. She's exactly the type their premium clients look for. Intelligent, physically perfect, young enough to adapt, but old enough to follow instructions. Thomas's hands clenched. Has he scheduled her for placement? Not yet, but he's been documenting her extensively. New photos, aptitude tests, psychological evaluations. It's usually what happens before they prepare a child for transfer. How much time do I have? I don't know. Weeks, maybe less. The process can move quickly once it starts. Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. Catherine was gathering evidence, financial records, communications with overseas contacts, medical records that were falsified. I've continued adding what I could access, but I don't have Catherine's medical credentials to get into the restricted databases. Thomas took the drive. Why are you helping me? You're putting yourself at risk. Lisa's eyes hardened. My younger sister disappeared from foster care 10 years ago. The agency said she was placed with a family in Europe. No records, no contact information. She was just gone. When I started working at Brighter Horizons and saw the same patterns, I knew. Catherine was the only one who believed me. Have you gone to the authorities? Maxwell has friends in every agency that might investigate. Catherine tried reporting her concerns once early on. The complaint disappeared, and a week later her apartment was broken into. Nothing taken, just searched. A warning. Thomas nodded grimly. I need to get Emma out of there. You can't just take her. Maxwell has legal guardianship. You'd be arrested for kidnapping, and Emma would be back at Brighter Horizons within hours. Lisa looked at him intently. You need irrefutable proof of your paternity and evidence that Maxwell's guardianship is fraudulent. Even then, with his connections, it won't be easy. I need a DNA test. Yes, but that's not enough. You need Catherine's original guardianship directives. She told me she filed paperwork naming you as Emma's guardian in the event of her death. Maxwell must have intercepted it and filed his own counterfeit version. Where would the original be kept? In the records room at Brighter Horizons, most likely. Maxwell keeps all sensitive documents there, under lock and key. It's in the East Wing, accessible only with his personal keycard. Thomas processed this information. Can you get me that keycard? Lisa shook her head. He keeps it with him at all times, and the room is monitored by security cameras. I need to see Emma. Talk to her privately. They watch her closely, but she's allowed in the East Garden for recreation period 3 to 4 p.m. daily. There's a section near the old oak tree that's partially obscured from the security cameras. If you could somehow get onto the grounds... I'll find a way, Thomas assured her. What about Catherine's evidence? She told Dr. Lawson she kept it where only Emma could find it. Lisa's brow furrowed. The rabbit, maybe? Hoppy? Catherine gave it to Emma on her 3rd birthday. Emma never lets it out of her sight, and Catherine used to tell her that Hoppy would keep her secret safe. Before Thomas could respond, headlights swept across the parking lot. Lisa tensed. I need to go. They monitor staff movements outside work hours. She started the engine. Be careful. Maxwell is more dangerous than he appears. Catherine wasn't the first person to disappear after asking too many questions. As Lisa drove away, Thomas sat alone in the darkened parking lot, the flash drive heavy in his hand. The enormity of what he faced settled over him, a powerful organization with political protection, a sophisticated trafficking operation disguised as charity, and at the center of it all, his daughter, waiting for a father she had never known to save her. He had failed Catherine. He would not fail Emma. Tomorrow, somehow, he would find a way to speak with his daughter. The following afternoon, Thomas parked his truck 3 blocks from Brighter Horizons, disguised in the uniform of a local landscaping company that serviced several properties in the neighborhood. With a baseball cap pulled low and a clipboard in hand, he walked with purposeful confidence along the perimeter of the property, noting the positions of security cameras and the patterns of the guard rotations. The east garden was visible through a decorative iron fence, an enclosed courtyard with stone benches, flower beds, and a massive oak tree dominating one corner. Perfect for his purposes. The landscaping truck he'd borrowed from a veteran friend was parked nearby, packed with legitimate gardening equipment to support his cover. At 2:45 p.m., Thomas approached the service entrance, clipboard raised as if checking details. When the guard stepped forward, Thomas smiled with practiced ease. "Afternoon, here for the oak treatment on the east lawn. Should be on your schedule." The guard frowned, checking his tablet. "I don't see any. Called in yesterday. Fungus treatment for the old oak. Mrs. Peterson and admin approved it." Thomas showed him a work order he'd created, counting on the guard's reluctance to appear uninformed. "You want me to call her? She seemed pretty concerned about that tree dying." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Go ahead, but stay in the east garden only." Thomas wheeled his equipment through the service entrance, setting up his supplies beneath the oak tree just as the first children were being led into the garden for their recreation period. He kept his head down, methodically working on the tree's base, applying a harmless solution to its trunk while watching for Emma. She appeared 10 minutes later, clutching her stuffed rabbit, separate from the other children as she made her way to a stone bench beneath the oak's spreading branches. Unlike the other children who played in carefully orchestrated games, Emma sat alone, whispering to her rabbit. Thomas worked his way around the tree until he was partially obscured from the main security cameras. When the supervising staff member turned to break up a minor dispute between two boys, he spoke softly. "Emma." She looked up sharply, eyes widening in recognition. "It's me, Thomas. From the cemetery. Don't look directly at me. Keep talking to your rabbit like you were doing." Emma immediately understood, lowering her gaze to Hoppy while whispering, "You came? Mommy said you would." "Yes. I need to ask you some important questions. Can you help me?" She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Your mother, Catherine, did she tell you about me?" "She showed me your picture every night," Emma whispered to her rabbit. "She said you were my real daddy, but I couldn't tell anyone because the bad people would hurt us." Thomas's heart constricted. "Did she give you anything to keep safe? Something important?" Emma clutched her rabbit tighter. "Hoppy keeps Mommy's secrets. She put them in his special pocket." Thomas glanced at the worn, stuffed animal. "May I see?" Emma hesitated, then carefully turned the rabbit over, revealing a small, nearly invisible seam along its back. "Mommy said only to show my real daddy. No one else." "That was very brave of you to wait. Can you bring Hoppy closer to the tree, like you're showing him the bark?" Emma complied, standing and walking to the tree, examining it with childlike curiosity while positioning the rabbit near Thomas's hands. With deft movements, he felt along the seam, identifying a small lump inside. He couldn't extract it here, too risky, but now he knew where to look. "Emma, listen carefully. I'm going to take you home with me, but I can't do it today. I need to make sure it's safe first." "When?" The single word contained such longing that Thomas had to swallow hard before answering. "Soon. Very soon. Is Mr. Maxwell being nice to you?" A shadow crossed her small face. "He wants me to go to a special school far away. He makes me practice my languages and says I need to forget about Mommy and you." Her voice dropped even lower. "Last night he took pictures of me for my placement portfolio. I don't want to go away." Thomas's blood ran cold. The process was already beginning. "You won't have to go, I promise. But until I come for you, you need to pretend everything is normal. Can you do that?" She nodded solemnly. "Mommy taught me how to pretend. She said sometimes it keeps you safe. Your mom was very smart. One more question. Do you know where Mr. Maxwell keeps important papers? Papers about you?" "In his special room, the one with the silver door. I saw him take my folder there once when he didn't know I was watching. East Wing? Where the big painting of the ship is. You need a special card to open it. Thomas heard footsteps approaching. Someone's coming. Go back to your bench now. Remember, pretend everything is normal. Emma obediently returned to her seat, resuming her one-sided conversation with Hoppy as a staff member approached. Emma, it's time for your tutorial session with Mr. Maxwell. Thomas watched, heart heavy, as Emma was led away. She didn't look back, her small shoulders squared with a composure no 6-year-old should have to maintain. Catherine had taught her well how to survive, how to keep secrets, how to wait for rescue. The thought of what his daughter had endured made his chest ache with a combination of pride and sorrow. He finished his work on the oak tree, packed up his equipment, and left through the service entrance, nodding to the guard who barely looked up from his phone. Once safely away from brighter horizons, Thomas drove straight to a private DNA testing facility recommended by Dr. Lawson. I need a rush paternity test, he told the technician, providing his own samples and a single blonde hair he'd carefully collected from Emma's bench. How quickly can you process this? Rush service is 48 hours, but I'll pay triple for 24-hour results, Thomas interrupted, sliding his credit card across the counter. That evening, Thomas examined the flash drive Lisa had given him. It contained a trove of damning evidence, financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies, medical evaluations of children with notes about their market value, and communications with overseas clients discussing specific requirements for children they wished to sponsor. Most disturbing were the placement records. Dozens of children who had passed through Brighter Horizons over the past 5 years, their destinations listed with clinical detachment. Client A7, Zurich. Client D3, Singapore. Client B12, Dubai. No follow-up documentation, no contact information, just the transfer of human beings as if they were commodities. Among the files was a folder labeled ECB, which Thomas realized with growing horror stood for Emma Catherine Blackwood. It contained psychological evaluations, academic assessments, medical records, and a chilling notation. Premium placement potential. Estimated value, 1.2 M, accelerated conditioning recommended. They were preparing to sell his daughter to the highest bidder. Thomas's phone rang, startling him. Lisa's number. They know, she said without preamble, her voice tight with fear. Maxwell's security team reviewed today's footage. They saw you talking to Emma. Thomas's blood ran cold. How much time do we have? They're accelerating her placement. Maxwell's called an emergency intervention meeting for tomorrow morning to declare Emma emotionally unstable. It's the first step in their expedited process. They'll sedate her, restrict her movements, prepare her for transfer. Once that happens, she'll be gone within days. I need to get her out now. You can't just take her. They'll have every law enforcement agency hunting you for kidnapping. You need legal standing. The DNA test won't be ready until tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. Lisa was silent for a moment. There's one other option. Catherine's original guardianship documents. If we could find those, prove Maxwell's guardianship is fraudulent, they'd be in the records room Emma mentioned. Yes. Maxwell's gone for the evening, dinner with some political fundraising committee. The night security is lighter, only 2 guards on rotation. If you could get in. Thomas made a rapid decision. Meet me 2 blocks south of Brighter Horizons in 1 hour. Bring Emma's complete file if you can access it. Thomas, this is incredibly dangerous. If you're caught, my daughter is about to be sold to human traffickers. I'm out of other options. After ending the call, Thomas changed into dark clothing and gathered supplies from his military days. Lockpicks, a small tactical flashlight, a signal jammer for the security cameras. This wasn't the first time he'd needed to enter a secured facility undetected, though never with such personal stakes. Lisa was waiting in her car at the designated meeting spot, her face pale with tension. I couldn't get Emma's complete file. It's in Maxwell's office, but I brought this. She handed him a key card. It's my access card. It won't get you into the records room, but it will get you into the building through the staff entrance. The night guard usually takes his break around 11:30, so that's your window. Thank you. This is a huge risk you're taking. Catherine was my friend. She tried to help my sister. Lisa's eyes were haunted. No more children should disappear. Thomas nodded. If anything happens to me, take everything we have to this FBI agent. He handed her Agent Sarah Daniels' card, a contact from his military days who specialized in human trafficking cases. She's not in Maxwell's pocket. The infiltration plan was straightforward. Thomas would enter through the staff entrance during the guard's break, make his way to the East Wing, access the records room if possible, and find Catherine's original guardianship papers. If successful, he'd have legal ammunition. If not, at least he might gather more evidence for when the DNA results arrived. At 11:25 p.m., Thomas approached Brighter Horizons from the rear service road. The main building was mostly dark, with security lights illuminating the perimeter. Lisa's keycard worked at the staff entrance, allowing him silent access to the quiet hallway beyond. Moving with the careful precision of his military training, Thomas navigated through the darkened corridors, avoiding the sight lines of security cameras when possible, using the signal jammer when not. The East Wing was separated from the main building by a short connecting hallway, its entrance marked by the painting of a ship Emma had described. The records room door featured a keycard reader with an additional keypad, more security than a typical filing room would warrant. Thomas examined it carefully, looking for weaknesses. The lock was high-end, but the door frame was standard, a design oversight. Using a thin metal tool, he carefully manipulated the latch mechanism while applying pressure to the door. After tense minutes of delicate work, the lock gave way. Thomas slipped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The room was lined with filing cabinets, their metallic surfaces gleaming dully in the beam of his flashlight. Each was labeled with an alphanumeric code rather than names, another layer of obfuscation. Thomas systematically checked each drawer, looking for any files related to Emma or Catherine. In the third cabinet, he found it, a drawer labeled ECB. Inside were dozens of folders documenting every aspect of Emma's life: medical records, psychological evaluations, education assessments, even a detailed conditioning program for her transition to placement. Buried beneath these was a sealed envelope marked "Original Documentation Restricted." Thomas opened it carefully. Inside was a certified copy of Emma's birth certificate listing him as her father, medical records from her birth, and, most critically, Catherine's notarized will and guardianship directive explicitly naming Thomas as Emma's legal guardian in the event of her death. Alongside these was a document that made his blood boil, a forged guardianship transfer, Catherine's signature clearly imitated but not quite matching her authentic handwriting on the will. This was the smoking gun, proof that Maxwell had falsified legal documents to gain control of Emma. Thomas photographed everything with his phone, then carefully replaced the files, making sure the cabinet looked undisturbed. As he turned to leave, his flashlight beam caught another filing cabinet labeled simply P Transfers. Curiosity and dread compelled him to investigate. Inside were records of completed placements, children who had already been sold through Brighter Horizons. Each file included photographs of children, their purchase prices, and destinations. Some files contained follow-up photographs showing the same children in lavish homes, performing as servants, or worse. The operation was larger and more horrific than he had imagined. Dozens of children trafficking annually, generating millions in profit. Thomas was so absorbed in documenting this evidence that he almost missed the sound of the door mechanism engaging. He barely had time to duck behind a cabinet before the door swung open, light flooding the room. "I know you're in here, Mr. Blackwood." Robert Maxwell's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Our security system registers every door opening, even when someone tries to jam the cameras. Not very professional for a former Army Ranger. Thomas remained silent, weighing his options. The room had only one exit, now blocked by Maxwell. "You should have stayed away," Maxwell continued, stepping further into the room. "Catherine made the same mistake. Couldn't leave well enough alone. She actually thought she could build a case against me." He chuckled softly, as if my associates would ever allow that. Thomas spotted Maxwell's reflection in a metal cabinet door. He was alone, but holding what appeared to be a handgun. "You have no idea how extensive our network is," Maxwell said. "Judges, police chiefs, politicians, people who understand the value of what we provide, premium children for premium clients. A service worth millions to the right buyers." Thomas carefully shifted position, preparing to move. "Oh, did you really think you could simply walk in and take Emma? She's already been promised to a very particular client who has specific requirements. Quite a generous offer, in fact. Your daughter is exceptionally valuable merchandise." The casual way Maxwell referred to Emma as merchandise broke something in Thomas. With calculated precision, he launched himself from behind the cabinet, using the momentary surprise to his advantage. Maxwell fired once, the bullet embedding itself in a filing cabinet as Thomas tackled him to the ground. The struggle was brief but violent. Maxwell had the desperation of a cornered predator, but Thomas had years of combat training and the motivation of a father fighting for his child. Within moments, Thomas had disarmed him, pinning him to the floor with a knee pressed firmly into his chest. "You can't win," Maxwell gasped, blood trickling from his split lip. "Take Emma, and every law enforcement agency in the country will be hunting you for kidnapping. My guardianship is legal on paper. You'll be a fugitive, and she'll end up right back here." "Not with the evidence I just found," Thomas replied coldly. "Your forged documents, Catherine's real will, the trafficking records. It's over, Maxwell." A strange smile spread across Maxwell's face. "You think evidence matters? My organization has been operating for 15 years. We've placed hundreds of children with wealthy, powerful clients around the world, clients who would be extremely uncomfortable if their arrangements were exposed." His eyes gleamed with malice. "How long do you think you'd live if you threatened that system? How long would Emma be safe?" Thomas increased the pressure on Maxwell's chest. "You're forgetting something. I've survived 3 combat tours. I know how to disappear, and I know how to fight enemies I can't see." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If anything happens to me or my daughter, everything I've gathered goes public, to every news outlet, every federal agency, with your client list attached. How long do you think you'd live if your clients were exposed?" Maxwell's expression faltered for the first time. "Here's what's going to happen," Thomas continued. "I'm leaving with the evidence. Tomorrow, when Emma's DNA test confirms what we both already know, I'm coming back with federal agents who don't belong to you. And you're going to face charges for everything: Catherine's death, document forgery, human trafficking." "You're a fool," Maxwell spat. "This is bigger than me. You can't protect her from what's coming." "Watch me." Thomas delivered a precise blow to Maxwell's temple, rendering him unconscious. Working quickly, he secured Maxwell with cord from his backpack and gagged him with a handkerchief. It wouldn't hold him for long, but long enough for Thomas to escape with the evidence. As he slipped out of the records room, a new urgency drove his movements. Maxwell's security team would discover him soon. Thomas needed to get the evidence to safety and prepare for what came next, the most important extraction mission of his life. Tomorrow, one way or another, he would bring his daughter home. Thomas drove through the pre-dawn darkness, his mind racing. The confrontation with Maxwell had accelerated his timeline dramatically. By now, Maxwell would be free and mobilizing his considerable resources, both legal and otherwise. The window for rescuing Emma was rapidly closing. He pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, choosing a booth with a clear view of both entrances. His phone showed 4:37 a.m., too early to call Agent Sarah Daniels, but he couldn't afford to wait. The phone rang 5 times before she answered, her voice alert despite the hour. "Daniels?" "Sarah, it's Thomas Blackwood. I need your help." A pause. "Thomas? It's been, what, 3 years? I wouldn't call if it wasn't urgent." He could almost see her sitting up, shifting into professional mode. "What's going on?" "I need to meet. I've uncovered a child trafficking operation disguised as a charity. They have my daughter." Another pause. "Your daughter? I didn't know you had—" "Neither did I until a few days ago. It's a long story, but I have evidence. Financial records, falsified documents, client lists. These people are selling children to wealthy buyers overseas. Where are you?" Her tone had changed. All business now. "Mason's Diner, off Highway 16. Stay there. I'm on my way. Don't talk to anyone else." 40 minutes later, Sarah Daniels slid into the booth across from him. She hadn't changed much since he'd last seen her. Still the same intense dark eyes, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, the focused expression of someone who never stopped hunting. They'd worked together briefly in Afghanistan when her FBI team was investigating a trafficking network targeting local children. Sarah had been relentless, fearless, and utterly incorruptible, exactly what Thomas needed now. "You look like hell," she observed, ordering coffee from the approaching waitress. "Been a rough few days." Thomas slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything I've gathered is on there. The organization is called Brighter Horizons Foundation. They present as a high-end residential facility for orphaned and abandoned children, but they're actually selecting, conditioning, and selling children to wealthy clients worldwide." Sarah pocketed the drive. "And your daughter? How does she fit into this?" Thomas explained everything. Finding Emma at Catherine's grave, discovering her birth certificate, the forged guardianship documents, his infiltration of Brighter Horizons, and finally, his confrontation with Maxwell. "Let me get this straight," Sarah said when he finished. "You broke into a secured facility, assaulted its director, and stole confidential files, all before confirming this child is actually yours? The DNA test results come back today, but I know she's mine, Sarah. She has my eyes, my expressions. Catherine's journal confirms it. And Maxwell is planning to ship her overseas immediately. I couldn't wait." Sarah sighed. "Thomas, I believe you, but Maxwell will have already filed charges against you. Breaking and entering, assault, possibly attempted kidnapping. With his connections, he could have a judge sign a restraining order by breakfast. You won't be able to get within a mile of Brighter Horizons without being arrested. Then we need to move fast. Once the DNA test confirms my paternity and we expose Maxwell's forged guardianship, I'll have legal standing. It's not that simple. Even with DNA confirmation, you'd need to petition the court for custody. That takes time. Weeks, sometimes months. Emma doesn't have weeks. Maxwell is expediting her placement. If we don't get her out now, she'll disappear like the others." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "I need to review this evidence before I can officially involve the Bureau. And even then I'll need approval for an operation." "How long?" "Best case, 24 hours to build enough probable cause for a warrant." Thomas shook his head. "Maxwell won't wait that long. The moment he realizes I've contacted the FBI, Emma will be gone." "What are you suggesting?" "I need to get her out today. After the DNA results come in, I'll have legal proof she's mine. Combined with Catherine's original will naming me as guardian, it should be enough to challenge Maxwell's custody. And in the meantime, if you approach Brighter Horizons, you'll be arrested on sight. I'm not going to approach it. I need you to buy me time. Review the evidence. Start building your case. Keep Maxwell distracted with official inquiries while I work on another angle." Sarah narrowed her eyes. What angle? The less you know, the better. Just trust me. I won't do anything illegal. That would be a first, she muttered, but her expression softened. Be careful, Thomas. These people don't play by any rules. If Maxwell really had Catherine killed, I know the risks. I'll do what I can. Start reviewing this evidence immediately. Make some discreet inquiries. But Thomas, she leaned forward, her expression grave. If you take Emma without legal authority, you become the criminal in the eyes of the law, no matter how justified you feel. I understand. Thomas stood, placing money on the table for their coffee. Call me the moment you have anything. Where are you going now? To get a DNA test result and talk to a lawyer. Thomas drove directly to the DNA testing facility, arriving just as they opened at 7 a.m. The technician recognized him from the day before. Mr. Blackwood, you requested rush results on a paternity test? Yes. Are they ready? Just came in. She handed him a sealed envelope. The results are also available in your secure online account. Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. The clinical language blurred before his eyes until he reached the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. The alleged father is virtually proven to be the biological father of the tested child. Scientific confirmation of what his heart had already known. Emma was his daughter. His next stop was the office of Alan Mercer, a family law attorney Dr. Lawson had recommended. Despite the early hour, Mercer had agreed to meet him, intrigued by the urgency in Thomas's voice during their brief phone conversation. Mercer was older than Thomas expected, in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. His office was cluttered but organized, the walls lined with legal texts and family photographs. So, Mr. Blackwood, Mercer said after Thomas had explained the situation, you've discovered you have a 6-year-old daughter, and you believe her current guardian obtained custody fraudulently and intends to traffic her overseas. That's quite a situation. I have evidence, Thomas replied, spreading out the documents on Mercer's desk. Emma's birth certificate, the DNA test results, photographs of Catherine's original will and guardianship directives, and the clearly forged documents Maxwell had filed. Mercer examined each document carefully, his expression growing more troubled. These certainly suggest fraud. The discrepancy between the authentic will and this guardianship transfer is blatant. The signatures don't match at all. So I have a case? You have the beginnings of one. The DNA test establishes paternity, and the original will naming you as guardian gives you standing to challenge Maxwell's custody. But legally removing a child from her current guardian requires a court order. How quickly can we get one? That's the problem. Even with these documents, we'd need to file an emergency petition, get on a judge's calendar, present evidence, possibly have a guardian ad litem appointed for Emma. It's a process that typically takes days, sometimes weeks. Emma doesn't have days. Maxwell is planning to move her immediately. Mercer frowned. There is one possibility. Judge Caroline Hammond handles emergency family court matters. She's known for cutting through red tape when a child's welfare is at stake. If we could get these documents to her today, emphasizing the imminent risk of Emma being taken overseas, let's do it, whatever it takes. I need to warn you, Maxwell has influence. If he learns we're approaching Judge Hammond, he might attempt to redirect the case to a more sympathetic judge. Then we need to move quickly and quietly. Mercer nodded, reaching for his phone. I'll make some calls, see if Judge Hammond can see us today. In the meantime, I suggest you stay away from brighter horizons. Any confrontation now could jeopardize our legal strategy. As Thomas left Mercer's office, his phone rang. Lisa. Thomas, you need to get here now, she said, her voice tight with fear. They're moving Emma this morning. Maxwell called an emergency staff meeting, said she's being transferred to a specialized facility for evaluation. They've already sedated her. Thomas's blood ran cold. When? Transport arrives at noon. They're packing her things now. He checked his watch. 9:17 a.m. Less than 3 hours. Where are they taking her? Private airfield outside the city. Maxwell's arranging it personally, said there were security concerns requiring immediate action. Maxwell was accelerating his timeline, trying to get Emma out of reach before Thomas could mount a legal challenge. I need you to stall them. Any way you can, just buy me time. I'll try. But Thomas, hurry. Thomas immediately called Sarah Daniels. Maxwell's moving Emma today. Private flight, noon departure. Damn it. I've only just started reviewing the evidence. There's no way I can get a warrant in time. What about an emergency court order? I've spoken with a lawyer who thinks Judge Hammond might intervene. Maybe, but Maxwell has likely anticipated that. He wouldn't move this quickly unless he had protection in place. Sarah was silent for a moment. There might be another option. If we can delay the flight, create a pretext for holding the plane. What kind of pretext? Leave that to me. Get your court order if you can, but have a backup plan ready. And Thomas, stay within the law. The moment you cross that line, you lose any chance of legally keeping Emma. His next call was to Mercer, updating him on the accelerated timeline. This changes things, Mercer said grimly. I've managed to secure a 10:30 hearing with Judge Hammond, but now we're racing the clock. Meet me at the courthouse in 30 minutes. Judge Caroline Hammond's chambers were austere, but not unwelcoming. In her mid-50s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair, she had the measured gaze of someone who had seen every type of family crisis imaginable. She listened without interruption as Mercer presented their case, examining each document as it was submitted. Let me be clear, she said when Mercer finished. You're alleging that Robert Maxwell, a respected philanthropist, has falsified legal documents to gain custody of your previously unknown daughter with the intention of trafficking her overseas. Yes, Your Honor, Thomas replied. I have evidence of both the document forgery and the trafficking operation. This is an extraordinary claim, Mr. Blackwood. What proof do you have of imminent harm to the child? Maxwell has scheduled Emma for transport today, noon departure from Westfield Private Airfield. Her destination is listed as a specialized facility overseas. But based on the evidence I've gathered, this is consistent with how other children have disappeared through his organization. Judge Hammond frowned. Mr. Mercer, is there any precedent for an emergency custody transfer under these circumstances? Yes, Your Honor. When there is credible evidence of imminent harm or illegal transport of a minor, the court has authority to issue an emergency custody order pending full investigation. Judge Hammond studied the documents again, particularly the DNA test and the forged guardianship papers. I find sufficient cause for concern to warrant temporary intervention. I am issuing an emergency order granting temporary custody of Emma Catherine Blackwood to her biological father, Thomas Blackwood, pending a full hearing. This order authorizes law enforcement to assist in transferring the child if necessary. Relief flooded through Thomas. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Blackwood. This is a temporary measure only. If your allegations prove unfounded, there will be serious consequences. I'm scheduling a full hearing for next week, at which time Mr. Maxwell will have the opportunity to respond. As they left the courthouse, Thomas clutched the court order like a lifeline. What now? Now we execute the order, Mercer replied. Typically, this would involve notifying the current guardian and arranging a supervised transfer. But given the urgency, we can request police assistance to secure Emma immediately. Thomas checked his watch. 11:10 a.m. Less than an hour before Emma's scheduled transport. Let's go. They drove to the local police precinct, where Mercer presented the court order to the desk sergeant. After a brief consultation with his superior, the sergeant assigned 2 officers to accompany them to brighter horizons. This is strictly a civil matter, the sergeant warned. We're there to keep the peace while the court order is executed, not to investigate any broader allegations. Thomas nodded, understanding the limitations. The court order gave him legal authority to take Emma, but it didn't address Maxwell's trafficking operation. That would come later, once Sarah had built her case. As they approached brighter horizons, Thomas's phone rang. Lisa, again. "They've moved up the timeline," she said urgently. "Transport is already here. They're taking Emma out now." Thomas's grip tightened on the phone. "Stall them. We're 5 minutes away with police and a court order." "I'll try, but—" Her voice cut off abruptly. "Lisa! Lisa!" The line was dead. Thomas turned to the officers in the car behind them. "They're removing her now." "We need to hurry." The small convoy accelerated, pulling up to Brighter Horizons' main gate with squealing tires. Thomas leapt from the car, court order in hand, as a black SUV with tinted windows emerged from the circular driveway. "Stop that vehicle!" he shouted to the officers. "My daughter's inside." One officer stepped into the SUV's path, hand raised, while the other approached the driver's window. Thomas and Mercer hurried toward the main entrance, where Robert Maxwell stood watching, his expression coldly amused. "Mr. Blackwood, back so soon, and with reinforcements, I see." Thomas thrust the court order forward. "Emergency custody order from Judge Hammond. I'm here for my daughter." Maxwell barely glanced at the document. "How unfortunate. Emma is no longer here. That SUV contains one of our other residents being transferred for medical treatment. Emma departed an hour ago for a specialized evaluation facility." "Judge's orders." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "What judge?" "Judge Martin Reynolds issued an emergency medical transport order this morning. Emma displayed concerning behavioral issues requiring immediate psychiatric intervention." Maxwell's smile was reptilian. "Your court order, I'm afraid, has been superseded." One of the officers approached, confirming the SUV contained a teenage boy and medical personnel, not Emma. "Where is she?" Thomas demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "As I said, receiving necessary care. Her location is confidential for her protection, especially from individuals who might traumatize her further." Maxwell's gaze flicked meaningfully toward Thomas. "Like a stranger claiming to be her father and attempting to abduct her." Mercer stepped forward. "My client has legal documentation confirming his paternity and guardianship rights. Judge Hammond's order is clear. And I have documentation of Emma's psychological evaluation and Judge Reynolds' order authorizing emergency treatment." Maxwell produced an official-looking document bearing a judge's signature. "Perhaps you should consult with Judge Hammond about jurisdiction in matters of mental health interventions. Mental health orders typically supersede standard custody arrangements." Thomas realized with sickening clarity what had happened. Maxwell had anticipated their legal move and countered with one of his own, using a judge in his pocket to create a competing legal narrative. It was a clever strategy. Even with Thomas's court order, the conflicting judicial directives would create legal confusion that would take days to untangle. By then, Emma would be long gone. "This isn't over, Maxwell," Thomas said quietly. "I believe it is, Mr. Blackwood." Maxwell's voice dropped to ensure only Thomas could hear. "By this time tomorrow, Emma will be with her new family overseas, a very wealthy, very private family who paid an extraordinary price for a child of her qualities. You'll never find her." Thomas lunged forward, but Mercer caught his arm. "Not here," the lawyer murmured. "Not now. It's what he wants." With supreme effort, Thomas controlled himself. "You're right." They retreated to their vehicles, Maxwell's smug expression burning into Thomas's back. Once they were out of earshot, Thomas turned to Mercer. "What now?" "He's outmaneuvered us legally." Mercer looked troubled. "We need to challenge Judge Reynolds' order immediately, expose the fraudulent psychological evaluation. But it will take time to get back before Judge Hammond, and even then—" "We don't have time." Thomas's decision crystallized. He had tried to work within the system, but the system was compromised. Thank you for your help, Alan. I'll be in touch. Thomas, wait. Whatever you're thinking, I'm going to get my daughter. Thomas walked away, ignoring Mercer's protests. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Daniels. Westfield Airfield, Hangar 7, 12:30 departure. Moving now. Maxwell had lied. Emma hadn't left an hour ago. She was being transported to the airfield now for a 12:30 departure. Thomas checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. He had 43 minutes to reach the airfield and somehow stop that plane. As he drove, pushing his truck to its limits, Thomas made one final call to Dr. Jennifer Lawson. "I need to know what sedatives they would use on a child Emma's age," he said without preamble. "Maxwell's people have drugged her for transport." "Jesus, Thomas." Jennifer's shock was evident. "Probably midazolam. It's fast-acting, creates anterograde amnesia, so she won't remember what happened." For a child her size, the effects would last 2 to 3 hours depending on the dose. "Any risks I should know about?" "Respiratory depression if they overdosed her. She'll be groggy, possibly nauseous when waking up." "Thomas, what are you planning?" "Whatever it takes." He ended the call, focusing entirely on the road ahead. Westfield Airfield was a small, private facility catering to corporate jets and wealthy, private pilots. No commercial traffic, minimal security, and, crucially, limited law enforcement presence. The perfect place to quietly transfer a sedated child onto a private jet bound for international waters. Thomas parked half a mile away, approaching the perimeter on foot. His military training took over, assessing the security, identifying blind spots, planning his approach. Hangar 7 was at the far end of the airfield, partially obscured from the main terminal. A sleek, white Gulfstream jet sat on the tarmac outside, its engines inactive but doors open as ground crew loaded luggage. And there, being escorted from a black SUV identical to the one he'd seen at Brighter Horizons, was a small figure. Emma, her movements sluggish, supported by a woman in a nurse's uniform. Even from a distance, Thomas could see his daughter was barely conscious, her head lolling as they guided her toward the waiting jet. Time had run out. The legal system had failed Emma. Now her father was her only hope. Thomas took a deep breath, made his decision, and began moving toward the hangar. Whatever the consequences, he would not let his daughter disappear. Thomas assessed the airfield with the practiced eye of a soldier. 2 security guards patrolled the main terminal area, but the private hangars operated with minimal oversight, privacy being a premium service for wealthy clients. A chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, but it was meant to deter casual trespassers, not determined intruders. He circled toward Hangar 7, staying in the shadows of adjacent buildings. The Gulfstream's engines remained silent, but ground crew were completing final preparations. Thomas counted the figures on the tarmac. 2 pilots reviewing paperwork, 3 ground crew loading luggage, the nurse still supporting Emma's drooping form, and a tall man in a dark suit. Not Maxwell, but someone with the same polished, dangerous bearing. One of Maxwell's operatives, tasked with ensuring the package reached its destination. Thomas needed a distraction. His hand brushed against his phone, and an idea formed. He dialed Sarah Daniels. "I'm at Westfield," he said quietly when she answered. "Emma's here, being loaded onto a Gulfstream at Hangar 7. They've drugged her. Departure seems imminent." "Thomas, wait. I'm still working on the warrant. If you intervene now—" "There's no time. The plane's ready to go." Sarah exhaled sharply. "I can call in a security concern to air traffic control, possibly delay departure for 30 minutes, but that's all. After that, if they have their paperwork in order—" "Do it. And Sarah, thank you." Thomas positioned himself behind a fuel truck, watching as one of the pilots answered a call on his radio. The man's posture stiffened, and he walked quickly to confer with his colleague and the man in the dark suit. Whatever they were discussing caused visible frustration. the suited man gesticulating angrily while the pilots maintained professional composure. The delay had worked. Now Thomas needed to get closer to Emma. The nurse had seated Emma in a private lounge area just inside the hangar, the girl's small body slumped against the cushions, her beloved stuffed rabbit clutched loosely in her arms even in her sedated state. The woman checked her watch repeatedly, stepping away briefly to speak with the suited man. Thomas seized his opportunity, moving swiftly along the hangar's exterior to a side entrance. The door was locked, but yielded to his practiced touch with a small set of tools he kept for emergencies. Within seconds he was inside, concealed behind stacked equipment cases. From this vantage point he could see Emma clearly, her blonde hair tumbling over her face, her breathing shallow but steady. The nurse returned to her side, checking her pulse with clinical detachment. "How much longer?" she asked as the suited man approached. "Air traffic control flagged something in our flight plan. Thornfield is handling it." His voice was clipped, impatient. "Is the girl stable?" "Yes, but I'll need to administer another dose if we're delayed more than an hour. I don't want her waking up mid-flight." "That won't be necessary. Thornfield knows how to expedite these matters." They moved away, conferring in hushed tones at the hangar entrance. Thomas edged closer to Emma, his heart pounding. He was committing a serious crime, regardless of his moral justification. Taking Emma now would legally constitute kidnapping. The court order gave him custody rights, but Maxwell's competing medical transport order complicated everything. If he was caught, he'd face charges, and Emma would still be shipped overseas. But looking at his daughter's sedated form, knowing what awaited her, there was no choice to make. Thomas moved quietly to Emma's side, gently touching her shoulder. "Emma," he whispered, "it's me. It's your dad." Her eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. The sedative had her firmly in its grip. Gathering her carefully in his arms, Thomas lifted Emma against his chest, making sure her rabbit remained secure in her grasp. She was lighter than he expected, fragile and small against his solid frame. A fierce protectiveness surged through him. This was his child, his blood, and he would die before letting anyone take her from him again. Moving with silent efficiency, Thomas carried Emma toward the side door he'd entered through. He was almost there when a shout rang out behind him. "Hey! Stop right there!" Thomas didn't look back. He pushed through the door and ran, Emma cradled securely against him, her head tucked under his chin. Behind him, he heard the suited man barking orders, the sound of pursuing footsteps growing louder. The fence was 30 yards away. Thomas ran toward it, his military training allowing him to move swiftly despite his precious burden. Emma stirred slightly in his arms, a small whimper escaping her lips. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured. "I've got you. You're safe now." Reaching the fence, Thomas shifted Emma carefully to a more secure position and began to climb, one-handed, his muscles straining with the effort. It was awkward and slow, too slow. The footsteps behind him were getting closer. As he reached the top, a shout came from directly behind him. "Put the child down! Now!" Thomas glanced back to see the suited man aiming a handgun at him. Not security, then. Something more dangerous. Maxwell's personal enforcement. "This child is my daughter," Thomas said clearly. "I have a court order granting me custody." "That's not how Mr. Maxwell sees it." The man's aim was steady, professional. "Last chance. Put her down." Thomas made a split-second calculation. The man wouldn't shoot with Emma in his arms. She was too valuable a commodity. He continued over the fence, dropping carefully to the other side, shielding Emma's body with his own. The suited man didn't fire, but spoke urgently into a radio as Thomas ran toward the spot where he'd left his truck. More shouts erupted behind him. They were organizing a pursuit. Thomas pushed himself harder, Emma's weight becoming more difficult to manage as his adrenaline began to flag. His truck came into view just as he heard the sound of a vehicle engine starting behind him. They were mobilizing to cut him off. Thomas reached the truck, fumbling with the door while keeping Emma secure. Once inside, he placed her gently on the passenger seat, securing her with the seat belt before starting the engine. The truck roared to life just as a black SUV rounded the corner behind him. Thomas floored the accelerator, tires squealing as he sped away from the airfield. In the rearview mirror, he saw the SUV in pursuit, closing the distance rapidly. Emma stirred beside him, her eyes opening briefly before fluttering closed again. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice small and confused. "I'm here, Emma. You're safe. Just rest." The SUV was gaining on them, the driver clearly skilled in pursuit tactics. Thomas took a sharp turn onto a side road, then another, trying to lose them in the maze of industrial buildings surrounding the airfield. His phone rang. Sarah Daniels. "Thomas, what have you done?" Her voice was taut with tension. "I have Emma. Maxwell's people were putting her on a private jet. She's been drugged, Sarah. They were going to disappear her." "Where are you now?" "Heading east from Westfield. I've got a tail. Black SUV. Professional driver." Sarah was silent for a moment. "Thomas, listen carefully. What you've done is technically kidnapping. Maxwell's already reported Emma missing, claiming a dangerous individual has abducted her during a medical transport. There's an APB out with your description." Thomas's grip tightened on the wheel. "I had no choice." "I know, but you need to understand the situation. Every law enforcement agency in the area will be looking for you. If you're caught now before I can build our case against Maxwell, you'll lose Emma permanently. What do you suggest? Get off the main roads. Find somewhere secure to lay low. I'm working on expediting the warrant based on the evidence you provided, but it's going to take time." The SUV was still behind them, maintaining distance but not losing them. Thomas made a decision. "I'm going to try to lose this tail. Then I'll contact you. Be careful. And Thomas, remember Emma is watching. Whatever happens next, we'll stay with her." The reminder hit home. Emma was witnessing everything, even in her sedated state. What kind of father did he want her to see? A desperate fugitive, or a man who maintained his principles even under extreme pressure? Thomas took a measured breath, formulating a plan. He wouldn't endanger Emma with a high-speed chase, but he couldn't allow Maxwell's people to recapture them either. He needed to be smarter, not just faster. He drove toward the downtown area where traffic would provide cover. The SUV stayed with him, 2 car lengths behind. At a busy intersection, Thomas made a sudden right turn, then an immediate left into an alley, emerging onto a parallel street. The maneuver bought him precious seconds as the SUV was forced to backtrack. Using the brief advantage, Thomas pulled into the underground parking garage of a large shopping mall, driving to the lowest level and finding a secluded corner to park. He killed the engine and turned to Emma, who was now stirring more frequently, the sedative beginning to wear off. "Emma," he said softly, brushing the hair from her forehead. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing confused blue eyes. His eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Is it really you?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's really me." Emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "I'm here to take you home. Where's Mr. Maxwell?" "The nurse said I had to go to a special school." Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to go." "You don't have to. You're staying with me now. I'm your father, and no one is going to take you away again." Emma's gaze sharpened slightly, fighting through the fog of medication. "Mommy said you'd come. She made me promise to wait." Her small hand reached for his. "I was scared you wouldn't find me in time." "I will always find you," Thomas promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Always." Emma's eyes drifted closed again, the sedative still affecting her. Thomas used the moment to consider their next move. They couldn't stay in the parking garage for long. Maxwell's people would be systematically searching the area, and with an APB out, law enforcement would be looking for his truck. He needed a secure location where Emma could recover from the sedation, somewhere Maxwell wouldn't think to look. And he needed to get the evidence from Emma's stuffed rabbit, the final piece that might bring down Maxwell's entire operation. Thomas gently examined the rabbit, finding the hidden seam Catherine had sewn. Inside was a small memory card carefully wrapped in protective plastic. Catherine's final insurance policy entrusted to their daughter for safekeeping. His phone rang again. Dr. Lawson. "Thomas, where are you? The police just left the hospital asking questions about you. They're saying you've kidnapped a child." "It's Emma, my daughter. Maxwell was shipping her overseas today. I had to intervene." Jennifer sighed heavily. "I was afraid of this. Listen, Emma needs a safe place to recover from the sedation. She'll be disoriented, possibly nauseous when she wakes fully. I'm working on finding somewhere secure. Come to my lake house. It's an hour north of the city, very private. No one knows about it except family." She gave him the address. "There's a key under the blue flower pot on the back deck. I'll come when my shift ends to check on Emma." "Thank you, Jennifer. I don't know how to repay you. Just keep that little girl safe." Catherine would have wanted that. Thomas carefully transferred Emma to the back seat where she could lie more comfortably, securing her with seat belts and covering her with his jacket. She murmured something indistinct, clutching her rabbit tighter. Before leaving the parking garage, Thomas sent a text to Sarah Daniels with the memory card's contents, a final fail-safe in case he was apprehended. Then he drove out through a different exit, taking a circuitous route north toward Dr. Lawson's lake house. As the city fell away behind them, replaced by wooded hills and scattered rural properties, Thomas allowed himself a moment of cautious hope. Emma was safe in his care, at least for now. The evidence was secure. Sarah was building her case against Maxwell. But he harbored no illusions about the danger they still faced. Maxwell's reach was extensive, his resources vast. And now Thomas had crossed a line that put him on the wrong side of the law. Regardless of his moral justification, he had technically kidnapped Emma from her legal guardian. The consequences of that action were still unfolding, a tragedy still in motion. But looking at Emma's sleeping form in the rearview mirror, Thomas knew he would make the same choice again, 1,000 times over. Some prices were worth paying to protect your child. Dr. Lawson's lake house was a modest cabin set back from a small, quiet lake, surrounded by pine trees that provided natural privacy. Thomas carried Emma inside, settling her on a comfortable sofa in the living room. She was beginning to wake more frequently now, each period of consciousness lasting longer as the sedative wore off. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice stronger than before. "Somewhere safe," Thomas assured her. "This is Dr. Lawson's house. Do you remember her? She was a friend of your mom's." Emma nodded slowly. "The nice doctor. She gave me lollipops when I had to get shots." "That's right. She's going to come check on you later." Thomas sat beside her, still marveling at this miracle, his daughter alive and real and here with him. "How are you feeling?" "My head feels funny and my tummy hurts." Emma's brow furrowed with the seriousness of a child trying to articulate complex sensations. "The nurse gave me medicine that made me sleepy. She said it was so I wouldn't be scared on the airplane." "You don't have to worry about that anymore. You're not going on any airplane." Emma studied his face with surprising intensity for a child her age. "Are you really my daddy? For real?" "Yes, Emma, I'm really your daddy. Mommy had a picture of you. She said you were a hero who saved people, but you had to go away for a while." Her small fingers traced the lines of his face. "She said you didn't know about me, but someday you would come find me." Thomas swallowed hard. "Your mom was right. I didn't know about you, or I would have been there from the very beginning. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "I promise." Emma seemed satisfied with this, settling back against the cushions. "I'm hungry." The simple, childlike statement, so normal amid the extraordinary circumstances, nearly undid Thomas completely. "Let's see what we can find in the kitchen." As he prepared a simple meal from the supplies in Dr. Lawson's pantry, Thomas kept Emma in his sight, still half afraid she might disappear if he looked away. She was growing more alert by the minute, the effects of the sedative gradually wearing off. They ate together at the small kitchen table, Emma asking questions between bites. Where would they live? Did he have any pets? Could she go to school again someday? Thomas answered each one patiently, marveling at her resilience. Despite everything she had endured, Emma retained the essential optimism of childhood. After eating, Emma's energy began to flag, the day's events and the lingering effects of the sedative taking their toll. Thomas helped her lie down on the sofa again, covering her with a soft blanket he found in a nearby closet. "Will you stay where I can see you?" she asked, a hint of anxiety creeping into her voice. "I'll be right here," he promised, settling into an armchair beside the sofa. "Get some rest, sweetheart." Emma clutched her rabbit closer. "His name is Hoppy," she informed Thomas solemnly. "Mommy gave him to me for my birthday. She said he would keep me safe until you came. Your mom was very smart." "I miss her," Emma whispered, her eyes growing heavy. "Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like." "I can tell you stories about her," Thomas offered, "so you'll always remember." "I'd like that." Emma's eyelids drooped, then closed. "Don't go away while I'm sleeping, okay?" "I won't. I'll be right here when you wake up." Thomas watched as Emma drifted into natural sleep, her breathing deep and even, her small face relaxed in a way it hadn't been while sedated. In that moment, with his daughter sleeping peacefully before him, the full weight of his situation descended. He was now a fugitive, accused of kidnapping. Maxwell would be leveraging every connection, using every resource to find them. Law enforcement would be searching as well, operating on the assumption that Thomas had abducted a child from her legal guardian. The evidence on the memory card might eventually vindicate him, but legal processes moved slowly. In the meantime, he and Emma were vulnerable, their future uncertain. Thomas's phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Daniels. "Evidence review underway, compelling but complex. Working on warrant. Stay secure. We'll update." At least that front was moving forward. Thomas checked his watch, 5:37 p.m. Dr. Lawson would arrive in a few hours. Until then, all he could do was keep Emma safe and wait. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through the pine trees, casting dappled shadows across the quiet lake. It was a peaceful scene, at odds with the storm Thomas knew was gathering. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same determination that had carried him through 3 combat tours and countless dangerous missions. But this mission was different. This time, failure wasn't an option. This time, his daughter's life hung in the balance. Thomas settled deeper into the chair, his eyes fixed on Emma's sleeping form, a silent promise passing between father and daughter. "Whatever it takes, I will protect you." Emma slept for nearly 3 hours, her body processing the last of the sedatives. Thomas remained vigilant, alternating between watching his daughter's peaceful breathing and monitoring the cabin's perimeter. The sun had begun its descent behind the pines, casting long shadows across the lake, when Emma finally stirred. "Daddy?" She blinked up at him, her voice clearer now. "You're still here." "I promised, didn't I?" Thomas smiled, relief washing through him at seeing her fully alert. "How are you feeling?" "Better." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "My head doesn't feel fuzzy anymore." Before Thomas could respond, headlights swept across the cabin windows. He tensed, moving quickly to the window. "Stay here," he instructed Emma, his voice low and steady. "Don't make a sound." He positioned himself beside the door, prepared for confrontation, but relaxed when he recognized Dr. Lawson's sedan pulling up. Still, he waited until he clearly saw her exit the vehicle alone before opening the door. "Jennifer, thank you for this." She stepped inside, medical bag in hand, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "How is she?" "See for yourself." Thomas gestured toward Emma, who was sitting up on the sofa, clutching Hoppy tightly. Jennifer's professional demeanor softened as she approached Emma. "Hello there. Do you remember me? I'm Dr. Lawson." Emma nodded shyly. "You were Mommy's friend. You gave me cherry lollipops." "That's right." Jennifer knelt before her, setting her bag aside. "I'd like to check you over, make sure you're feeling okay. Is that all right?" As Jennifer examined Emma, Thomas stepped outside onto the deck, needing a moment to collect himself. The events of the past few days crashed over him in waves. Finding Emma at the cemetery, discovering Catherine's secrets, the confrontation with Maxwell, the desperate rescue from the airfield. It felt like years had passed, not days. His phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Daniels. "Evidence compelling. Judge reviewing warrant request. Maxwell pushing kidnapping narrative hard. All agencies searching. Stay dark." Thomas deleted the message immediately. Sarah was making progress, but it would take time during which he and Emma remained vulnerable. Maxwell would be using every resource at his disposal to find them, spinning the narrative that Thomas was a dangerous kidnapper who had abducted a child from legal custody. The door opened behind him, and Jennifer stepped out, her expression somber. "She's doing well, physically," she said quietly. "The sedatives have mostly cleared her system. No signs of trauma from today's events." "And emotionally?" "That's harder to assess. She's remarkably composed for a child who's been through so much. Catherine clearly prepared her well." Jennifer hesitated. "Emma told me about Brighter Horizons, the conditioning they subjected her to, the way Maxwell would evaluate her for placement. She understood more than they realized." Thomas's jaw tightened. "She should never have had to understand such things." "No, she shouldn't have." Jennifer glanced back at the cabin. "I brought supplies, food, clothes for Emma, some basic necessities. There's also a burner phone in the bag. My number is programmed in it." "Thank you for everything." "What's your plan, Thomas? You can't stay here indefinitely. Every law enforcement agency in the region is looking for you." "I know. I'm waiting on Sarah Daniels to secure a warrant based on the evidence from Catherine's memory card. Once Maxwell is in custody and his operation exposed, I can surface with Emma." Jennifer looked skeptical. "And if that takes too long, or if Maxwell's connections block the investigation, then I'll take Emma somewhere they can't find us." "Somewhere she'll be safe." "You'd live as a fugitive? With a 6-year-old child?" Thomas met her gaze steadily. "If that's what it takes to protect her, yes." Jennifer studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Catherine chose well, it seems." She handed him a small package. "Medical supplies, just in case. I should go before anyone notices my absence. The cabin is stocked with enough provisions for a week." After Jennifer left, Thomas returned inside to find Emma exactly where he'd left her, sitting quietly on the sofa with Hoppy. Her patience and stillness were disconcerting in a child so young, another legacy of her time at Brighter Horizons. "Dr. Lawson says you're doing great," he said, sitting beside her. "Are you hungry again?" She brought us some food. Emma nodded. "Can I help make dinner? Mommy used to let me stir things." The simple request, so normal and yet so poignant, squeezed Thomas's heart. "Of course you can." They prepared a simple meal together, Thomas showing Emma how to safely stir the pasta, teaching her when to add ingredients. Her delight at these ordinary activities was both heartwarming and heartbreaking, evidence of how much normal childhood experience she had been denied. As they ate, Emma gradually opened up, telling Thomas about her life with Catherine, their small apartment with the yellow kitchen, the books her mother would read to her every night. She spoke of Catherine with a child's blend of matter-of-fact acceptance and profound grief. Her mother was gone, but the memories remained vivid and cherished. After Mommy went to heaven, Mr. Maxwell said I had to live at brighter horizons. Emma continued, her voice growing quieter. He said I was special and needed special training for my new family. Thomas kept his expression neutral despite the rage building inside him. What kind of training? Languages? Manners? How to be quiet and not ask questions. Emma pushed her food around her plate. They took my clothes and gave me new ones. They took all my toys except Hoppy because I cried too much when they tried. That must have been very hard. Emma nodded solemnly. Mr. Maxwell said my new family was very important and only wanted perfect children. He said if I wasn't perfect, they would send me back, and then no one would want me. Thomas gently covered her small hand with his. Emma, listen to me. You don't ever have to be perfect. You just have to be you. And I will always want you exactly as you are. She looked up at him, her blue eyes, so like his own, searching his face. Promise? I promise. Emma seemed to accept this, returning to her dinner with renewed appetite. After they had finished and cleaned up together, Thomas settled her on the sofa with a book from Dr. Lawson's shelf. As Emma read aloud, demonstrating the advanced reading skills Maxwell had so coldly cultivated for her market value, Thomas checked the perimeter again, ensuring the cabin remained secure. When he returned, Emma had set aside her book and was looking at him with unexpected solemnity. Daddy, are the bad people going to find us? Thomas sat beside her. What makes you ask that? You keep checking the windows, and you look worried. Her perception was unnerving. At brighter horizons, they taught us to watch people's faces to know what they're really thinking. Thomas considered his response carefully, balancing honesty with reassurance. I'm being careful because that's my job, to keep you safe. But you don't need to worry about that. That's my responsibility, not yours. Emma absorbed this, then asked, What happens next? A friend of mine is working to make sure Mr. Maxwell can't hurt any more children. Once that happens, we can go home. Where's home? The simple question gave Thomas pause. His apartment wasn't suitable for a child. It was a place he slept, not a home. We'll find one together, he said finally. Somewhere with a yard, maybe near a park. Would you like that? Emma nodded, her face brightening. Could I have a yellow room, like our kitchen before? Absolutely. And can Hoppy have his own bed? Thomas smiled. Hoppy can have anything he wants. Emma leaned against him, a gesture of trust that felt like a gift. I think Mommy would be happy we're together now. I think so too, Thomas said softly, gently stroking her hair. They stayed like that as twilight deepened into full darkness, the only sound the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. Eventually, Emma's breathing deepened as she drifted towards sleep, her small body warm against his side. Thomas carefully lifted her, carrying her to the cabin's small bedroom. He tucked her in, making sure Hoppy was secure in her arms, and sat beside the bed until she was fully asleep. Only then did he allow himself to check the burner phone Jennifer had left. There was a text waiting. News reporting nationwide search for kidnapped girl. Maxwell giving press conference tomorrow 9 a.m. FBI involvement unclear. Stay secure. Thomas deleted the message, his jaw set. Maxwell was doubling down on the kidnapping narrative, using the media to pressure law enforcement and shape public opinion. A nationwide search meant their window for remaining hidden was shrinking rapidly. He returned to the main room of the cabin, turning on the small television with the volume low. Every news channel carried the same story. An unidentified man had abducted a 6-year-old girl from her legal guardian during a medical transport. The girl was described as vulnerable and in need of specialized care, her abductor as dangerous and delusional. Maxwell had clearly prepared his counterattack well. By positioning Emma as a child with special needs, he created a narrative where any attempt by Thomas to claim paternity would appear self-serving and harmful. The public would see not a father rescuing his daughter from traffickers, but a disturbed individual endangering a vulnerable child. Thomas turned off the television, disgusted. He checked his watch. 10:37 p.m. He needed to rest while Emma slept, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. But first he secured the cabin, checking locks and setting up improvised alarms at entry points. Skills honed during his military years, now deployed to protect his daughter. He had just settled onto the couch when the burner phone vibrated again. This time it was a call, not a text. Thomas answered cautiously. "It's Sarah." Her voice was tense, urgent. "We have a problem. The judge reviewing our warrant request received a call from a Senator Mitchell, apparently one of Maxwell's key allies. Suddenly, our evidence is being scrutinized with extraordinary skepticism. He's blocking the investigation." "Trying to." "I'm pushing back, going around him to a federal judge I trust, but it's slowing everything down." Sarah paused. "There's more. Maxwell has scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning. Based on the advance materials his people are circulating, he's going to announce that Emma has a rare psychological condition requiring specialized treatment. Treatment you're preventing by kidnapping her." Thomas's grip tightened on the phone. "That's absurd. She's perfectly healthy." "It's a clever strategy. It makes any custody claim you file look selfish and harmful to Emma's welfare, and it justifies the sedation, the hasty transport, everything you witnessed." "What's our counter?" "The memory card from Emma's rabbit. Catherine documented everything. Medical records proving Emma's perfect health, recordings of Maxwell discussing her market value with overseas clients, financial transactions. It's damning evidence, but getting it in front of the right authorities is proving challenging. Maxwell's network is fighting us at every turn." Thomas processed this, weighing options. "How much longer?" "Best case? 48 hours before we can secure a federal warrant." "Worst case?" Sarah trailed off. "They find us first," Thomas finished grimly. "Yes, the search is intensifying. Maxwell's connections have ensured this is being treated as a high-priority kidnapping. Local and state police, FBI, even Border Patrol have been alerted. Your description and vehicle details are everywhere." Thomas made a rapid decision. "We need to move, tonight." "To where?" "Better you don't know. I'll contact you when we're secure." "Thomas, wait." "There's a marshland preserve about 20 miles north of your current location. Very isolated, minimal surveillance. A colleague of mine owns a hunting cabin there. Off-grid, hard to find unless you know exactly where to look. I can text you the coordinates and entry details." "Why tell me this?" Sarah's voice softened slightly. "Because I've reviewed all the evidence and I believe you. What Maxwell is doing is evil and the system is failing to stop it. Sometimes justice needs alternative routes." After ending the call and receiving the coordinates, Thomas moved quickly. He gathered their few belongings, packed the supplies Jennifer had brought, and gently woke Emma. "Sweetheart, we need to go on a little adventure," he explained, helping her into a jacket. "Right now, while it's still dark." Emma rubbed her eyes but didn't protest, displaying once again that unnatural compliance that twisted Thomas's heart. "Are the bad people coming?" "No, but we're going to stay ahead of them. It's like a secret mission, just you and me." This framing seemed to reassure her. Emma clutched Hoppy tightly as Thomas carried her to the truck, securing her in the back seat where she would be less visible. Within minutes, they were driving north on deserted back roads, the truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. Emma fell asleep again quickly, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts. The gravity of their situation pressed down on him. He was driving deeper into fugitive status, evading law enforcement while authorities across the country searched for them. If caught now, he would face serious charges, and Emma would be returned to Maxwell's custody with additional security to prevent another rescue attempt. But the alternative was unthinkable. The evidence on Catherine's memory card had revealed the full horror of Maxwell's operation. Children evaluated, conditioned, and sold to wealthy clients worldwide, their identities erased, their futures determined by their market value. Emma had been slated for a premium placement, with a client willing to pay over $1 million for a child with her specific attributes. No legal system, no court order, no judge could compel Thomas to deliver his daughter back into those hands. Not while he drew breath. The marshland preserve loomed ahead, a vast expanse of wetlands and forest barely touched by human development. Following Sarah's coordinates, Thomas navigated increasingly narrow dirt roads until they disappeared entirely. The final half-mile required leaving the truck concealed under brush and continuing on foot, Emma drowsy but cooperative in his arms. The cabin was exactly as Sarah had described. Small, rustic, and perfectly hidden in a dense stand of cypress trees. Inside was basic but functional. A wood stove, simple furniture, solar-powered lights, and a hand pump for well water. It was the kind of place that wouldn't appear on satellite imagery, wouldn't draw attention from aerial searches, wouldn't register on any system Maxwell could access. Thomas settled Emma on the cabin's single bed, tucking her in with Hoppy. She stirred briefly, eyes opening to confirm his presence before closing again. He brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead, overcome once more by the miracle of her existence, and by the fierce determination to protect her at any cost. Outside, the first hints of dawn were appearing on the horizon. Thomas stood on the cabin's small porch, watching the mist rise from the marshlands, creating an ethereal landscape that seemed removed from the world of press conferences, court orders, and manhunts. In this moment of stillness, the truth he had been fighting to reveal suddenly seemed fragile and distant. What if Maxwell's influence prevailed? What if Sarah couldn't secure the warrant? What if the evidence wasn't enough to overcome the powerful network protecting brighter horizons? Thomas had risked everything to save his daughter. He had crossed lines he never imagined crossing, becoming the very thing Maxwell accused him of being: a kidnapper, a fugitive, a man outside the law. If justice failed them now, what remained? A lifetime in hiding, a constant flight from authorities? What kind of life would that be for Emma? As the sun broke over the trees, illuminating the mist-covered marshland in gold, Thomas faced the possibility that had been growing in his mind since the moment he lifted Emma from that hangar. If the system failed to deliver justice, he might need to create justice of his own. The thought was both terrifying and clarifying. Thomas had always believed in order, in systems, in the ultimate triumph of right over wrong. His military service had been built on those principles. But now, watching the sun rise over a landscape where he hid with his daughter from those sworn to uphold the law, he understood that sometimes justice required more direct action. If the evidence couldn't stop Maxwell through legal channels, perhaps it needed to reach the public directly. A story so shocking, so thoroughly documented, that not even Maxwell's powerful connections could suppress it. Thomas pulled out the burner phone, composing a message to Sarah Daniels. Prepare backup plan. If warrant fails, we release everything to media simultaneously. Maxwell can't silence every outlet. He paused before sending, weighing the consequences. Such an action would expose Maxwell's entire operation, potentially saving dozens of children from trafficking, but it would also eliminate any chance of Thomas quietly regaining legal custody of Emma. They would become central figures in a national scandal, their privacy forever compromised. Was that price worth paying? Thomas looked back toward the cabin where Emma slept peacefully, finally safe after years of silent preparation for a fate no child should face. Yes, whatever it took to ensure she remained free, to ensure no other child suffered as she had nearly suffered. Thomas sent the message, then deleted it from the phone's history. The decision was made. One way or another, through legal justice or public exposure, Robert Maxwell's operation would end. The truth would emerge. As the sun continued its ascent, burning away the morning mist, Thomas returned inside to find Emma awake, sitting up in bed with Hoppy clutched to her chest. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, forcing lightness into his tone. "Are you hungry?" Emma nodded, studying his face with that unnerving perceptiveness. "Are you worried again?" Thomas sat beside her. "A little bit. But not about you and me. We're going to be fine." "Because you're my daddy," Emma said with simple certainty. "And you found me, just like Mommy said you would." "That's right." Thomas brushed a gentle hand over her tangled blonde hair. "And now that I've found you, nothing will ever separate us again." As they prepared a simple breakfast together, Thomas pushed aside the weight of their uncertain future. For this moment, in this hidden cabin, there was only a father and daughter building the beginnings of a relationship that should have existed from her birth. One meal, one conversation, one shared smile at a time. Whatever came next, this truth remained unshakable. He had found his daughter, and he would protect her with everything he possessed. All other considerations, his freedom, his future, his very life if necessary, were secondary to that fundamental commitment. The revelation that had begun with a child's whisper at a cemetery had transformed Thomas completely. He was no longer just a former soldier haunted by the past, but a father with an unbreakable purpose. And in that transformation lay a power that even Robert Maxwell, with all his wealth and influence, would ultimately fail to overcome. The truth was finally emerging from shadows that had concealed it for too long, a truth that would change everything. 6 months later, Thomas stood at Catherine's grave, watching as Emma carefully arranged wildflowers around the headstone. The September sunshine warmed the marble, highlighting the inscription, "Catherine Ann Blackwood, beloved mother, courageous soul." "Do you think Mommy can see these?" Emma asked, adjusting a daisy with solemn precision. "I think she can," Thomas replied, his voice gentle, "and I think she would love them." Emma nodded, satisfied. At 7 now, her birthday had passed the month before, she seemed both older and younger than her years. In some moments she displayed the serious composure forced upon her by circumstances. In others, the natural exuberance of childhood that had been suppressed for too long. The journey to this peaceful moment had been anything but peaceful. The morning after their escape to the marshland cabin, Robert Maxwell had held his press conference as scheduled. With practiced sincerity, he had expressed concern for little Emma's fragile psychological state, described her supposed rare condition requiring specialized care, and painted Thomas as a dangerous, delusional man who had ripped a vulnerable child from necessary medical treatment. Thomas and Emma had watched the performance on the cabin's small battery-powered television, Emma's small hand gripping his tightly as Maxwell fabricated a version of her that had never existed. "He's lying," she had whispered. "I don't have a special condition. He told me I was healthy and smart, and that's why I was worth a lot of money." Her simple statement, spoken with a child's direct honesty, had crystallized everything for Thomas. Hours later, when Sarah Daniels called to report that Maxwell's political connections had successfully delayed the warrant indefinitely, he had been prepared with an alternative plan. "Release everything," he had told her. "All of it." To every major news outlet, Every child advocacy organization, every law enforcement agency not in Maxwell's pocket, simultaneously, so it can't be suppressed. Thomas, if we do that, your privacy, Emma's privacy, is a price worth paying. Maxwell is counting on our desire to stay hidden, to handle this quietly. Let's change the rules. And so they had. The next morning, like a coordinated explosion, Catherine's evidence had appeared everywhere. Financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies, video recordings of Maxwell discussing children as merchandise, medical evaluations assigning monetary values to human beings, and most damning of all, Catherine's own testimony, recorded weeks before her death, detailing the entire operation. Within hours, the story had shifted dramatically. Maxwell's press conference, instead of shaping the narrative, became evidence of his willingness to publicly lie. The kidnapping transformed into a desperate rescue by a father who had discovered his child was about to be trafficked overseas. Law enforcement agencies not connected to Maxwell's network began questioning the rush to label Thomas a kidnapper without investigating his claims. The turning point had come when Lisa Martinez, the staff member who had helped Thomas, emerged from hiding to corroborate Catherine's evidence. Her testimony about her own sister's disappearance through a similar organization years earlier lent additional credibility to the mounting case against Brighter Horizons. 3 days after the evidence went public, federal agents had raided Brighter Horizons, uncovering additional documentation that expanded the investigation to 3 other children's charities operating similar trafficking networks. Maxwell had been arrested attempting to board a private jet to a non-extradition country, his emergency passport and offshore banking credentials in hand. The media frenzy had been intense. For weeks, the story dominated headlines. Charity director charged in international child trafficking ring. Dozens of children recovered in multi-state operation. High-profile donors named in Brighter Horizons investigation. Through it all, Thomas had kept Emma secluded at Sarah Daniels' family cabin, protecting her from the chaos, while legal proceedings established his rightful custody. DNA evidence, Catherine's will, and the exposed fraud of Maxwell's guardianship ultimately convinced the courts, and 4 weeks after their flight from the airfield, Thomas had officially become Emma's legal guardian. The transition to normal life had been gradual, challenging, and often heartbreaking. Emma had nightmares, attachment anxieties, and moments of regression. She would wake crying for Catherine or panic if Thomas was out of sight for too long. The psychological conditioning she had endured at Brighter Horizons emerged in subtle ways. Her instinct to please at all costs, her fear of making mistakes, her tendency to evaluate her own worth in terms of performance. Thomas had found them a house in a quiet neighborhood with a fenced yard, painted Emma's room the exact shade of yellow she wanted, and arranged for specialized therapy with professionals experienced in childhood trauma. Slowly, patiently, they had begun building a life together, father and daughter healing each other through daily acts of ordinary love. Now, 6 months after the rescue, they had established rituals and routines. Sunday visits to Catherine's grave, Monday pizza nights, Wednesday trips to the library. Small, consistent touchstones that provided Emma with the security her life had previously lacked. The legal aftermath continued to unfold. Maxwell awaited trial on multiple federal charges, his operation dismantled, his assets frozen. Several of his political allies had resigned amid investigations into their connections to the trafficking network. Most importantly, dozens of children had been identified and recovered from overseas placements, though many others remained missing. Emma finished arranging her flowers and stood back to survey her work. "I made a pattern," she announced. "Pink, white, yellow, pink, white, yellow. Mommy liked patterns." "It's beautiful," Thomas assured her. "She would love it." Emma nodded solemnly, then reached for his hand. "Can we get ice cream now? You promised." "I did, didn't I?" Thomas smiled. guiding her toward the cemetery gates. "What flavor are you thinking?" "Chocolate chip." "No." "Strawberry." "No." Emma's face scrunched in concentration. "Both. Can I have both?" "Absolutely." This was new. Emma expressing preferences, making choices, changing her mind. Early on, she would ask what she was supposed to want, seeking the right answer rather than expressing her own desires. Each small assertion of independence felt like a victory. At the ice cream shop, Emma carefully selected her combination: 1 scoop strawberry, 1 scoop chocolate chip, and they sat at a small table by the window. Thomas watched as she focused intently on her treat, methodically alternating flavors with each bite, occasionally offering Hoppy, still her constant companion, imaginary tastes. "Daddy?" she asked suddenly, looking up from her ice cream. "Are the bad people all gone now?" Thomas considered his response carefully. Emma deserved honesty, but tempered by security. "Mr. Maxwell is in jail," he said finally. "He can't hurt you or any other children anymore. But there are other bad people like him?" "There are. But there are many more good people working to stop them. People like Agent Sarah and Dr. Lawson and your mom." Emma absorbed this, nodding thoughtfully. "And you." "And me," Thomas agreed. "That's why you were a soldier, right? To stop bad people?" "That's right." Emma returned to her ice cream, seemingly satisfied. Thomas marveled at her resilience, her ability to process difficult truths and find equilibrium. The therapist had emphasized the importance of age-appropriate honesty, explaining that children often feared imagined dangers more than acknowledged realities. After finishing their ice cream, they walked to the nearby park, where Emma had recently conquered her fear of the tall slide. Thomas watched as she played with increasing confidence, occasionally making brief friendships with other children before returning to check that he was still watching. His phone vibrated with a text from Sarah Daniels. "Maxwell offering plea deal, trading information on international network for reduced sentence. Prosecutor consulting victims' families. Your input valued." Thomas felt a complex surge of emotions. Part of him wanted Maxwell to face the maximum punishment for his crimes, for Catherine's death, for the children who remained missing, for the years Emma had spent in fear. Another part recognized that dismantling the entire network might save more children in the long run. "Daddy, watch this!" Emma called from the top of the slide, her face alight with excitement. Thomas tucked the phone away, focusing entirely on his daughter as she sailed down, landing with a triumphant laugh. The decision about Maxwell could wait. This moment, Emma's joy, her growing trust, her healing, took precedence over everything else. Later that evening, after Emma's bath and 2 bedtime stories, a negotiation that had ended with Thomas agreeing to just one more, but a short one, he sat beside her bed, watching as she arranged Hoppy carefully on the pillow beside her. "Daddy?" Her voice was drowsy, edging toward sleep. "Will you tell me about when you and Mommy were in the Army? The story about the sandstorm?" Thomas smiled. Emma had favorites among the stories he shared about Catherine, ways of keeping her mother present in her life. "Your mom and I were stationed at a forward operating base in Afghanistan," he began, his voice low and gentle. "It was my second tour, her first." He continued the familiar tale, how Catherine had guided an injured soldier through a blinding sandstorm using only her voice and determination, how she had remained calm when everyone else panicked, how she had later shrugged off praise by saying simply, "I just did what needed doing." By the time he finished, Emma was asleep, her breathing deep and even, one small hand still clutching Hoppy. Thomas remained beside her, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her chest, still sometimes needing reassurance that she was real, that she was safe, that she was his. The past 6 months had transformed them both. Emma was gradually shedding the protective shell she had developed at brighter horizons, rediscovering the joyful, curious child she was meant to be. And Thomas had found purpose beyond his military service, beyond his grief for Catherine, a purpose centered on nurturing this remarkable little person who carried both his DNA and Catherine's indomitable spirit. There were still challenges, of course. Emma's recovery wasn't linear. She had setbacks, difficult days when trauma resurfaced in unexpected ways. The legal proceedings continued, occasionally requiring Thomas's testimony, forcing him to relive the darkest moments of their ordeal. And practical matters demanded attention. School enrollment, financial planning, creating stability for a child whose early years had been defined by uncertainty. But through it all, one truth remained constant. Thomas had found his daughter, and nothing would separate them again. He leaned down to place a gentle kiss on Emma's forehead before leaving her room, door cracked open just enough to let in a reassuring shaft of light from the hallway. Another of their carefully established routines. In the living room, Thomas settled at his desk, responding to Sarah's text. Support whatever approach recovers the most children. Emma is secure now. Other families deserve the same. His gaze drifted to the photograph beside his laptop. Emma at her 7th birthday party, blowing out candles on a cake they had baked together, her face alight with uncomplicated happiness. Beside it stood an older photo of Catherine, laughing in desert camouflage, her arms crossed as she leaned against a Humvee. Two images separated by time and tragedy, yet connected by love and sacrifice. The road ahead would not be easy. Emma would face questions as she grew older, would need to process the full truth of her early years, would navigate the complex legacy of a mother who died protecting her, and a father who found her against all odds. But they would walk that road together, one day at a time, building something strong and true from the ashes of what might have been. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the window, golden in the porch light's glow. Another season turning, another chapter beginning. Thomas closed his laptop and moved to the window, watching the peaceful neighborhood where they had made their home. Ordinary houses filled with ordinary families living ordinary lives. After everything they had endured, ordinary felt like an extraordinary blessing. Upstairs, Emma slept safely in her yellow room, surrounded by books and toys and all the simple treasures of childhood. Downstairs, her father kept watch, grateful beyond words for the second chance they had both been given, a chance to be a family, to heal together, to build a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The journey that had begun with a whispered "Daddy" at a cemetery had led them here, to this quiet house on this quiet street, to a life reclaimed from those who would have stolen it. The path had been darker and more dangerous than Thomas could have anticipated. But the destination, this hard-won peace, this precious, ordinary existence, was worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty. In the end, the soldier who had once fought for his country had waged his most important battle for his daughter. And in that battle, despite overwhelming odds, love had prevailed over evil, truth had emerged from shadow, and a father and daughter who should never have been separated had found their way back to each other, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. Thomas turned from the window, switching off the porch light before heading upstairs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to be the father Emma deserved. And he would meet each one with the same determination that had carried them through the darkest days, one step at a time, together. After all, he had made a promise, not just to Emma, but to Catherine and to himself. Never again would his daughter face the world alone. It was a promise he intended to keep. Dear friends, have you ever wondered what lengths you would go to protect family? Thomas Blackwood's journey reminds us that even in our golden years we can summon extraordinary courage when it matters most. When this former soldier discovered a little girl at his late wife's grave calling him Daddy, he uncovered a truth that would change everything, a daughter he never knew existed and a conspiracy that threatened her future. Despite a system stacked against him, Thomas fought with unwavering determination, risking everything to save Emma from those who saw her as nothing more than a commodity. His story speaks to what many of us understand deeply, that family bonds transcend all obstacles, that it's never too late for second chances, and that the ordinary moments, Sunday visits to mother's grave, ice cream debates, bedtime stories, are life's greatest treasures. Thomas and Emma's journey from strangers to family reminds us that healing is possible even after profound loss. What lengths would you go to protect someone you love? And when was the moment you realized family means more than blood? It means showing up when it matters most. Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.